Hello there, my lovelies. How are we doing today? Welcome back to my channel, Boomy Reactions. Now, today we're going to be exploring the folklore of Southern California. Oh my gosh, it's very exciting. So this has been requested by one of my wonderful patrons, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. So yes, okay. So Paul, you say, here's an interesting video if you're into the weird, but possibly true of California. Well, I'm absolutely into the weird. I love folklore, I love myths, I love legends, and when they're more regional based and they're like, and they're local, they're even better. I don't know, they make them that little bit more believable. What do you think? But yes, I've always been into myths and legends. Like, oh gosh, I think I was always a bit of a macabre child, a bit morbid, if you can tell. Yeah. It started with Greek mythology, I think, because you kind of delve into that a little bit in school somewhat when you're learning about the Greeks and the Romans in school. So yes, I think it went from there, and then it just got weirder and weirder. You know, it's like a bit like a rabbit hole, isn't it? So fantastic. I cannot wait to see about the folklore, specifically to Southern California. Now, what do I think is going to pop up? So I'm thinking, was Bigfoot ever associated with that kind of region? Was there spottings of him in the redwoods? No. Maybe Bigfoot's going to pop up there. The Mothman. I hope we're going to see some of these characters. Oh my gosh, and the monster of Lake Tahoe, right? What's that called? What's the name of it? Lake Tahoe's monster. I can't remember. Hopefully it'll crop up here. So let's get started with the video, guys. It's a bit of a long one, so I should just stop talking right now and just play the video. We'll be here for like 2 hours. My lovelies, if you're enjoying these reactions, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. If you're interested, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee account. That link is over here. And if you are interested in supporting this channel any further, I have a Patreon account. And if you fancy checking that out at all, that link is in the description below. Come on, hit me with the weird. Yeah. Get into the mood.
Howdy doody, folks, and welcome back to our journey across the United States. Today we're visiting Southern California, which, and I mean this in a good way, may be one of the capital cities in the state of weird. And we're going to talk about everything from conspiracies surrounding a missing Scientologist figurehead to strange accounts of extraterrestrial visitors.
Yes, we need some UFO spottings in there, don't we? We need some aliens. Balance it out a little bit. Okay. So, is that true? Is California known as being one of the top weirdest states? Why? Any reason why? Hey, do you know what? I love it, guys. I'm all about the weird and the wonderful, so bring it on. Love it, love it, love it.
Over U.S. airspace, and much, much more. Now, if you want to see more like this, I urge you to subscribe, like the video, and comment. I always respond to early commenters, and this tells YouTube, hey, this guy's all right. With that, great seeing y'all here, and let's get into some of Southern California's weird folklore.
Yes. I want some ghosts and ghouls as well, please. The Lost Reptilian City under LA!
One of my favorite poll results ever, that is both slightly uplifting and somewhat troubling at the same time, is that, according to a 2013 survey by Public Policy Polling, 4% of Americans, or about 13 million people, believe in lizard people.
Lizard people? This is a new one for me. Is it a bit more of a modern thing, the reptilian people? Where do they come from? What's the origin of this? Is it like descendants of the dinosaurs? Do you think? I don't know how likely that it's not likely at all. But you know, we can believe.
Leave it up to you whether you think that is uplifting or troubling yourself. Regardless, this statistic suggests that about 1 in 20 individuals take it a little bit more literally than you or I when they choose Argonian as their race in Skyrim. And if rumors are to be believed, if you're a Los Angeles native, these Argonians may very well have once lived just beneath your feet. And some say the remnants of this civilization still exist in tunnels found deep below Los Angeles.
Oh, so there's tunnels. Oh, I want to see them. I want to see the photos of the tunnels.
To start, though, just a bit of history on our cold-blooded bipedal counterparts. Stories of lizard people date back about as far as recorded history. For instance, in ancient Sumer, one of the earliest civilizations, there are figurines that date back to the Ubaid period, presumer, that appear lizard-like or semi-reptilian. Further, from
I mean, is that lizard-like, or maybe that's how they depict humans? There's nothing aside from the shape, having kind of a merged chin neck, like an iguana. There's nothing specifically about them that screams lizard-like. I mean, maybe I wasn't paying attention and I missed a tail.
Sumerian and Babylonian myth, we can find records of deities referred to as the Anunnaki, which a minority of modern conspiracists interpret as extraterrestrial reptilian beings. Heck, even in Buddhism and Hinduism, you can find stories of the Naga, or serpent beings, that are often characterized as having the ability to take on a human form or appear as half-human, half-serpent. And even in Native American folklore, the Hopi tribe told stories of snake people, or serpent clans, that were probably more symbolic than literal tales of reptilian humanoids, but are a worthwhile mention. In short, though, this idea in folklore that some sort of reptile-human hybrid was bopping around this planet wasn't exactly niche. It was pretty much universal, and perhaps because of this, it should be no surprise that it's found its way into modern conspiracy ecosystems, that these legends of old were not just allegories, but rather factual tales of reptilian beings.
Now, I'm going to end up stopping this video and driving it to be like 2 hours long. I'm sorry. I'll try not to. The whole thing with the serpent people, I would say maybe not so much with the example here from the Native American tribe, their folklore about that one. But earlier back, when they had depictions of them, they had very, very long tails, almost a bit kind of sea serpent-like. So do you think there's an element of the mentality being, because this was a very, very long time ago, and voyaging across the waves and across the oceans, not so much of a big thing, when we go far back enough. So like the Celts, like quite often they believed that like the heavens and everything were under the water, because traveling across bodies of water wasn't possible. So it's almost like the unattainable. So like I suppose like the heavens have been to us like more recently, once you conquered the waves, the skies are the next one, aren't they? But I wonder if there's an element there. So maybe they assumed they were quite deity-like, and like sea serpents. Do you know what I mean? I might be completely wrong. I just had a little thought there. Maybe that goes hand in hand with it. Interesting. The Argonians, the reptilian people.
In regards to these modern conspiracies of lizard folk, you'll find what is potentially their Western genesis right here in Los Angeles. This story begins with a man named George Warren Shuffelt in 1933, a self-proclaimed geophysicist and mining engineer who, through some unmentioned circumstances, managed to hear tales from Hopi folklore from a Hopi tribesman called Chief Greenleaf. Now, let me be clear. What we're about to talk about isn't verbatim Hopi folklore. Rather, it's thought that George heard Hopi folklore that was real and then loosely reinterpreted or wildly misinterpreted it in the first place. But regardless, through this folklore, he became convinced that a race of lizard folk related to the Mayans fled a prehistoric meteor shower and created multiple vast underground civilizations underneath the Pacific coast of the modern-day USA. These lizard folk were supposedly so advanced that they used some sort of chemical reaction to actually carve a network of 285 tunnels, which is a very specific number, which had chambers to house thousands of families, as well as food and water stores inside. And funny enough, next week in the Grand Canyon, we'll see evidence of something similar there. And
is there actual evidence of these tunnels? No, come on. If there was a network of tunnels like this, we'd know, wouldn't we? We'd be able to know that. Oh, guys, I'm sure there's many of you that have more knowledge about this, and you're much more knowledgeable than I am anyway. I'm hearing this for the first time. Let me know if you know any information about these. It's very interesting, but I remain skeptical about these.
Of course, hearing this folklore, George would develop an apparatus he referred to as the radio X-ray machine, which he thought could detect these tunnels, and he would use this machine side by side with some supposed ancient sheepskin maps that two others brought to his attention. Using these maps to guide his X-ray use, George would then go on to claim that he identified this network of tunnels, locating thousands of feet of tunnels and rooms with gigantic floor spaces, as well as rooms where he suspected gold was stored in subterranean passages, even creating a map of these passages, which he claimed stretched across the city in the shape of a lizard, ranging from modern-day Elysian Park, which was at the tip of the lizard's head, to the modern-day Central Library at the...
Now, while I don't dispute that that tunnel system might be there, let me know if it is, guys, honestly, let me know. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've been made by the reptilian people, maybe just civilizations from a long, long time ago.
End of its tail.
More
and
humanoid.
I know you're thinking to yourself, this is just a kook. Even in 1933, there's no way people took this seriously, right? And, I too once had faith in humanity, but that faith is long left behind due to incidents like this. Rather than, thinking this was goofy, the Los Angeles Times and Associated Press of 1933 actually followed this saga and reported on it, and he even managed to swindle the County Board of Supervisors into letting him dig on North Hill Street, I quote, overlooking Sunset Spring and North Broadway, with the promise that if he found gold, which the LA Times was claiming might be buried Spanish gold from the colonial period, he would split the profits with them. Of course, as you might expect, George never did find this gold.
What is it with seeking gold from California? Well, not gold as in gold rush gold coins. Okay, what made him believe that there were Spanish gold coins to be found under these locations here? I don't think he's a kook at all. I think, he's a man of science. And he's found a source of information and he's set out to prove or disprove it. I don't think that makes him a kook at all.
Instead, he found boulders and a bit of mud and otherwise about 250 feet of literal air, as he wasted a small fortune digging by Depression-era standards. Eventually, as you might expect, enthusiasm for finding this subterranean lair waned, money would dry up, and just as suddenly as they arrived, George and his radio X-ray would leave this enterprise behind. From what I can tell, George tried no more lizard escapades and lived out his days in Los Angeles until he passed away in North Hollywood in November of 1957. That said, by golly, what a legacy to leave.
Elysian Park's buried treasure.
So I love a good buried treasure story. And in this journey across the USA, we've chased these tales all over the country, from Oregon's lost gold-filled stream to the cursed Native American mine tucked somewhere in the Oregon mountains, to the Adams Diggings story in New Mexico, and even to Vermont's odd story of pirate gold buried and guarded by a pirate ghost. If you can't tell, gold secretly stashed in the remote wilderness seems to be an American tradition, but what I haven't run into very often is the idea of buried treasure in a major city.
Or actually being found. I think it goes hand in hand, doesn't it, with the exploration of the New World, or what was the New World. So many people set out across the seas, across the Atlantic, or the Pacific, maybe the other way. And they had dreams of establishing themselves, finding their riches. And all it takes is just a story of someone finding gold or whichever. And that's it. Everyone has their heart set on it. So I am not surprised that there are so many tales of buried treasure, pirate treasure. I'm not surprised. I think it goes hand in hand with the searching for the American dream and finding your fortune in the New World. Absolutely.
Yet, if you believe the legend, some say there may
seekers.
be a fortune in gold and jewels hidden in the hills just a few thousand feet from where Dodger Stadium stands today. Now, in terms of what you'll hear when you research this legend, usually people repeat the simple version, that wealthy Mexicans buried their riches in the hills of modern-day Elysian Park during the Mexican-American War. But the roots of this story, surprisingly, go much deeper than that. To begin, most stories don't start here, but there are some records that between 1818 and 1831, Francisco Jose Avila, Los Angeles' first mayor and the man who built LA's first house, is said to have quietly buried part of his fortune under a pepper tree in what is now Elysian Park. Avila, you see, was a wealthy cattle rancher, and according to an 1896 article in, I quote, the Omaha Daily Bee, so not a Los Angeles newspaper, he supposedly had around $100,000 worth of coins and jewels, at least in 1896 money, to protect them from bandits, fearing that these ruffians might steal his riches. Now, this story doesn't necessarily state these riches were buried in Elysian Park, but a lot of people suggest this is the place that it's pointing out. Now, that newspaper story is one of the earliest written references to treasure in those hills, and it predates the Mexican-American War version by decades. And then the legend picks up in the 1840s, becoming the modern version you'll usually hear today, amid the turmoil leading up to and during the Mexican-American War. Factually speaking, to give you a rundown on this war, Texas declared independence in 1836, and then the U.S. recognized it in 1837, and then, despite Mexico's objections, the U.S. annexed Texas in 1845. Following this, some Mexican troops would fire on American soldiers the next year in 1846, and then President James Polk used that conflict as grounds to declare war and to seize a massive portion of Mexico's northern territory as part of the Mexican-American War. By 1848, the U.S. had absorbed what is now California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming, expanding all the way to the Pacific. And at nearly the same moment, gold was officially discovered in California. But there are long-standing claims that may be urban legends in their own right that locals and Mexican citizens knew about this gold far earlier. They simply kept it quiet, though. So, according to the legend, as U.S. forces moved towards Los Angeles in 1846, wealthy residents panicked. Their valuables, often heavy chests filled with coins, jewelry, and religious items, were too cumbersome to carry as they fled the region. Many supposedly, therefore, made their way into the rugged hills of modern-day Elysian Park and buried their fortunes, intending to retrieve them later. Admittedly, there are in fact historical mentions that wealthy residents really did hide their valuables, rather than hand them over to American troops. But whether they hid them in Elysian Park, that's the part no one can prove. Now, for decades after the war, there's surprisingly little reliable documentation about any buried treasure here. The legend seems to have lived mostly through oral retellings, occasionally newspaper blurbs and references to mysterious pits found dug in the hills that point to treasure hunters digging sizable holes in modern-day Elysian Park, acknowledging that treasure hunting was going on related to this urban legend, or maybe that old residents came back to grab what they buried there. Despite this, though, the legend never really exploded into the public imagination until the 1970s. In 1974, you started to see some action, though. Now, I couldn't find exactly who made this request, but the city of Los Angeles officially on the record denied a treasure digging permit to someone. This is on the record, and in response, preservationist Grace Simons publicly warned that if treasure was really found, it could spark a gold rush in the park. Of course, as you might expect, instead of discouraging anyone, this city's public statement on the treasure just poured fuel on the fire. By 1979, treasure hunter Roy Rausch entered the picture. See, two Mexican-American women actually hired him, claiming their family's long-lost treasure might be buried in the park. And armed with a metal detector, Roy scoured the hills and reported finding a handful of symbols carved into rocks, with one stone engraved with the letters OC. He eventually deciphered whatever this rock's pattern was according to him, and he actually dug down 30 feet at a spot he believed was promising. There, at the bottom of this pit, he found an old rope and an old corroded flashlight battery from the 1940s. To him, this meant one thing. Somebody else had already beaten him to a stash. But this didn't dissuade him. Rather, it convinced him that something at one point had been buried at this spot. Just 5 years later, a man named Marvin stumbled upon a sandstone boulder covered in etched lines and holes, and he thought this was a map of the park's ravines, with markers for treasure. And as it turns out, they were the very same markings that Roy had seen earlier and interpreted the same way. Marvin's search eventually led him to Roy's old tunnel too, which, funny enough, he would report to park rangers and city officials who, from what I can tell, simply warned him about digging at this point, because I think he suggested this to them. Regardless, he would claim that these officials would then cover up the tunnel entrance with dirt and logs, and Marvin later claimed they also removed or destroyed the rock carvings to stop treasure hunters.
On safety grounds as well, maybe. Like that, when you go digging tunnels and everything, you don't know what's going to happen. So maybe it's more of a cautious thing, like, oh gosh, they're digging again in that really dangerous tunnel. We're going to end up with casualties or fatalities, worst case scenario. So let's just do everyone a favor. Let's just go and seal it off, because otherwise people are going to end up falling. Things are going to come caving in, and yeah, I mean, that sounds more likely to me, as opposed to, they knew it was there and they sealed it off and they wanted it for themselves. I think it might be a safety thing.
Though, to be clear, the city strongly denies this, saying they barely have enough staff for regular maintenance, let alone destroying artifacts. Anyhow, whether Marvin was uncovering a conspiracy or simply seeing patterns where none existed remains part of the lore. Now, in the couple of decades following this, the treasure became less obscure and actually made its way into newspapers, books, and even Season 2 of Unsolved Mysteries. It was mainstream at this point. Regardless, despite all of this attention, and presumably an increased wave of treasure hunters, no treasure here has ever publicly surfaced. No chest of coins, no silver bars, no jewels, only rumors that someone, somewhere, beat everyone else to it.
Now, I am fully behind this. I think this sounds totally plausible, totally reasonable. I mean, I'd say it sounds quite likely given, the reason why people would have buried their treasure and their belongings. I'm not saying it's necessarily an absolutely massive haul of gold, but, even if it's just a modest little chest full of coins and jewels and, jewelry, you never know. But that sounds totally plausible, likely, very likely actually. It's just, guys, I don't know if you've noticed, but California is a really big place. So it's like, well, it's trying to find a needle in a haystack. They could be anywhere really, couldn't they?
Regardless, to this day, the legend lives on, and some say that millions of dollars worth of gold and jewelry still lie somewhere in the canyons near Dodger Stadium. Others believe every cache was found long ago, its discoverers choosing silence over fame.
Yeah.
While Elysian Park is the most popular spot, these rumors extend all across the city, with some at Monterey Park or Old Camp 19 too. But as far as I can tell, nothing has been found there either. But who knows, maybe in our lifetime, someone will finally stumble onto the Elysian Park treasure and prove that the hills above Los Angeles really were hiding gold all along.
I think it's the source of, I don't know, like a famous or really wealthy family. I think it might be, maybe it's the source of their wealth. UFOs, yes! Edwards.
I think it goes without saying, but Southern California's relationship with unidentified flying objects is an absolute mess, and it would be a documentary in its own right to take a true deep dive into this region's affinity for strange aerial phenomena. But in my digging into this, I found an interesting story about something I've been pretty intrigued by recently, a tale of an unidentified flying object visiting a U.S. Air Force base, something that, at least in this case, results in a very interesting first-hand account, and most prominently opened my eyes to prior and future cases like this that occurred right here at this same military base. To begin, I first came across an event that happened in 1965, an event that is documented in its entirety in a 47-minute-long audio log that documents radar operators, communication officials, and airmen having a conversation about an unexpected visitor over the skies of Edwards Air Force Base. But in the event you don't want to listen to that 47-minute 2-minute long audio
Oh,
log.
47
I'll give you the
minutes
summary.
Okay.
Edwards Air Force Base in Kern County, California, is about 55 miles north of LA, and the date of this encounter was October 7th of 1965. It was the depth of the Cold War, and as a country, we had just gotten out of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So things were not, as I say, hunky-dory, and therefore radar operators the nation across were keeping their eyes on the sky.
Absolutely.
And in the midst of this state, while those eyes were keenly watching the sky, we started noticing strange things that might remind these Edwards Air Force Base operators all too much of those supposed Japanese planes that their 1942 counterparts saw flying over LA. At the Edwards Air Force Base radar screen, at least 3, but as many as 12 craft were observed. These craft weren't identifiable, nor were they weather or clutter, according to the Air Force Tech Sergeant Chuck Sorrells, who has come forward to talk about what he saw since.
Oh, it's very interesting. Now, I do think that a lot of instances of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, the cynic in me believes, I don't think they're alien craft. I think it's far more likely that they're just, tech or aircraft from a different nation that's not identifiable because we don't know anything about, that technology maybe. I know nothing. It might be very, very naive to say that. And I'm sure a handful of you can tell me why I'm wrong. So let me know in the comments. Maybe it's absurd to think, oh, well, why would another nation have such vast technology that we wouldn't even be able to identify? That's daft, Boomy. Let me know. But yeah, that's always been my way of thinking. I don't think it's necessarily alien objects, just more nothing that we've seen before, but it's actually from halfway across the world.
In the 90s, in an interview, he'd say with certainty what he was witnessing was not an aircraft, nor a helicopter, nor something pedestrian like a weather balloon. There was not, in his words, something we know of as a flying object that could do the sort of maneuvers this thing did. Soon after observing these objects, which are photographed in historical radar archives on screen right now, he'd alert his superiors, even in the radio logs that have been made public since this event, saying that he alerted the Edwards Air Force Base UFO officer, who took an interest in whatever this craft was. From there, the base actually decided whatever this was worth intercepting, and they actually chose to scramble an F-106 interceptor aircraft to try to identify this craft. For context, the F-106 didn't have a gun or the ability to carry bombs, but it did have AIM for Falcon air-to-air missiles with an internal weapons bay.
Okay.
I should note this craft was also extremely fast, and actually on December 15th of 1959, just 6 years before this incident, the world speed record of 1,525.96 miles per hour was actually set in this craft. In short, there was pretty much very little that wasn't highly classified at this point in time that would have been able to outrun this little F-106.
I'm glad he said that. Okay, so, just to put it into perspective, nothing can outrun this. If this manages to dart across the sky, there is no technology known that can do this. Or maybe it's just very secretive. Like, highly sensitive information from a different nation. I don't know.
Period. Regardless, this pilot would have the tower choose one of these craft to intercept, and it would set out to get it. But as the aircraft was in the air searching for the craft in the radio records, you can hear Chuck Sorrells saying for the pilot to search high, and then he would indicate that the craft was rapidly rising, despite the fact that the F-106 was at 40,000 feet. Also, from what I can tell, the F-106 pilot or ground team did at one point indicate that they observed, I quote, green, red, and white flashing lights coming from whatever they thought this craft was, but it seems the pilot quickly lost visuals on the target if he ever had it at all. Now, you might say this was a SR-71 Blackbird, a then top-secret craft that could absolutely make a getaway from a mere F-106. But these things did not glow, according to any records I found, so they wouldn't have been making the green, red, and white flashing lights, and beyond this, I don't know why any foreign counterpart to this sort of top-secret aircraft would make itself known by running lights either. To be clear, that is the short and easy of this particular story, that US airmen and radar operators saw some sort of craft semi-visually, but also on radar, and that the fastest plane they had at their disposal was completely outmaneuvered, which, this is interesting to me, but honestly I wouldn't have included this account if not for the fact that just 8 years prior to this incident, something else that is, dare I say, more fascinating occurred at Edwards Air Force Base.
I mean, could it have been, the space race? A different nation attempting to design and create craft that can make it, into space, like early prototypes and whatnot. And no, I'm grasping at straws here, guys.
Something that perhaps sheds some light on what exactly this unidentified craft might have been. See, in the spring of 1957, Edwards Air Force Base was in a similar place as it was in the 1965 account that we just talked about.
Okay.
It was already one of the most secretive and technologically advanced test sites in the entire USA. And working here was one Captain Gordon Cooper, a man who would go on to become a famous astronaut. Cooper, even then, was a person you took seriously. In the 1950s, he flew cutting-edge aircraft and was a project manager at Edwards Air Force Base, where he supervised flight instrumentation, precision photography, and engineering documentation for experimental aircraft during the golden age of test flying.
Right.
High speeds, high risks, and very little margin for error.
So very, very educated, very clued up on the capabilities and the limitations of objects flying whatever speeds, heights, So this is your guy. He knows what he's talking about. Okay, that doesn't necessarily rule out somewhere else having better technology, especially if it was like classified and top secret. You never know. But okay, so this guy definitely knows what he's talking about.
Yet, despite these risks, Cooper excelled. His technical sharpness and his calmness under pressure made him stand out among some of the best aviators in the world. Further, if you can't tell, due to his experience, he was the kind of person that knew exactly what it meant for technology he witnessed to be cutting edge. But, despite this, in the spring of 1957, he would observe something that would defy everything he understood. At this particular point in time, Cooper's work required meticulous photographic analysis, and he actually supervised camera crews who used precision equipment to track aircraft performance over the wide, flatbed lakes that made Edwards ideal for flight testing. Funny enough, it seemed that someone else, or something else, decided in addition to the US military, though, that this wide, flat lake bed would make an excellent spot for some testing. According to Cooper's later accounts, this incident unfolded on May 3rd of 1957, during one of his otherwise routine filming operations. On this day, a two-man camera crew had been stationed at a dry lake bed to record test flights when they reportedly witnessed a silent, disc-shaped craft descend from above. They claimed that the object extended 3 landing legs, settled onto the lake bed, and then lifted off effortlessly without producing any audible sound.
Like our classic visual of a UFO. How many times have we seen it, guys, where the disc shaped, it comes and it lands and it gets out its little spindly legs. Yeah. Okay. So maybe these tales, that's the origin of what we always think stereotypically UFOs are going to look like. So maybe there's a lot of stories that have an awful lot of things in common, and that's how come this weird kind of stereotype gets generated. Okay, interesting.
The photographers said they captured both still images and motion picture footage of the craft's entire sequence, its approach, landing, and then rapid departure. Of course, shaken, they brought the exposed film of this craft directly to Cooper, telling him that the event had occurred at close range on open, unobstructed terrain. Cooper, of course, said he followed the standard Cold War-era protocol for the sensitive imagery. He claimed he sent the film for urgent processing, viewed the developed material himself, and confirmed that it showed exactly what the crew had described. He then sealed the footage and forwarded it to higher headquarters in Washington, D.C. But after that, he reported the trail simply went cold. No analysis was returned to Edwards, and no official documentation about the event or film has ever surfaced publicly. The absence of an archival record leaves the chain of evidence incomplete, though the described procedures matched how classified test range footage was routinely handled world at the time. Anyhow, with this footage, I think you can go a few ways. On one hand, you could say to yourself, well, Edwards Air Force Base was the epicenter of the USA's cutting-edge flight research, and it was already an environment full of exotic prototypes, missile tests, and classified hardware. Perhaps the USA, owning this space, decided they'd run a quiet little test here that even these individuals that were used to seeing classified aircraft weren't in the loop on.
Yeah.
On the other, you could say that given this was where the best of the best in terms of human technology came out to play, maybe it was a point of interest for visitors from another world who wanted to see what we were capable of.
I just kind of think if it was, visitors from another world, it just seems, would they really pick this location to get, or maybe it's to observe the technology that we have. I don't know. But then again, you could say, even if it was from another nation, aren't they doing the same thing? They know where you're going to be and they want to come and observe the kind of technology that you've got. And like I say, the space race, just having a bit of a nose, seeing how far advanced you're getting.
Either way, though, and I don't say this often, if this was filmed and Cooper saw this film as clearly as he said he did, I don't doubt him for a second. Cooper, from birth to death, was pretty much considered a respected, trusted, and insanely competent individual, even among the original US astronauts and within the Air Force test pilot community, which is arguably the most competitive and unforgiving group of aviators in human history.
Yeah.
There aren't many times I'll say this, but if Cooper says he saw this, I believe him. And you probably should too.
Yeah.
As for what he did see, though, that's up for debate.
I think he definitely saw it. It's more the reason behind what it could be. The green mist.
In Chino Hills, California, there's a long-standing urban legend built around a road that locals have treated like a haunted spot, a forbidden zone, or at the very least, a place wrapped in mystery. From the 1950s through the 1980s, or possibly even earlier, this place was downright notorious. If you drive to where Payden Drive dead ends into Woodview Road, turn right, and then take the very first left onto a road also called Woodview Road, and follow this all the way down, you'll eventually reach a gate. And it's not just any gate. This one is plastered with signs that scream road closed, danger explosives, hazardous waste area, and unauthorized personnel keep out. You know the works. And frankly, this is a little intense considering you're only about, 14 miles from Disneyland. But the creepy signage wasn't the only thing that made this spot infamous. Back when the site was in active use, locals in Chino Hills reported something far stranger drifting out of the secured property. Green mist. Yes, actual clouds of glowing green fog supposedly spilling over the edges of the fenced-off land and creeping toward nearby neighborhoods. When you combine a heavily guarded compound, nobody knowing what's going on inside, and mysterious green fumes floating into town, Folklore pretty much manufactures itself.
Is it a site for disposing of hazardous waste? Maybe nuclear waste? If I'm being honest, guys, I don't really know what happens to nuclear waste. It can't be good, but where does it go? But yeah, if this is, depending on the waste, I suppose, maybe it's like a byproduct. Maybe it's like, I don't know, I think of, not clinical waste, but if I think of like hazardous waste or toxic waste, my mind generates the idea of green, glowing ooze or gas clouds, maybe. I mean, yeah, like I say, I don't pretend to know. I'm absolutely talking out of my bum. I might not understand it at all, but could that be a thing? Maybe. Ooh.
Assembly required, and I found plenty of wild
nest.
stories attached to this place because of that. For example, old newspaper clippings and forum posts from the early 2000s describe teens sneaking up to the gate, which was already outfitted with a security camera, even in the 1950s, and they claimed to witness all kinds of bizarre things. Along with the famous green mist, kids reported seeing disfigured humans, robed figures performing cult-like rituals, and even outright sacrifices. Others swore they heard unexplained explosions, or were sometimes chased away by men dressed like combat-ready military personnel. Naturally, this narrow back road with steep drop-offs and a generally spooky vibe became a sort of rite of passage destination for local teens. If you grew up in Chino Hills, proving your bravery probably meant driving down to this place and daring each other to get close to the fence, or in some cases, trespassing entirely to see what secrets hid beyond the gates. Now, usually I love these Lover's Lane gone spooky stories, but they generally aren't actually scary places. But the more I dug into what was actually happening at this site, the more I found myself thinking, oh geez, I hope those kids, now in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, did not wander too far in, because unlike most haunted road legends, this one turned out to be based on a very real, very dangerous operation. This
I hope they're not glowing with radioactivity. Oh, God.
Site, in reality, was known as the Chino Hills site for a company called Aerojet, now Aerojet Rocketdyne, a major U.S. aerospace and defense contractor responsible for rockets, missile components, and munitions used by the military and NASA. And here, only 14 miles from the self-proclaimed happiest place on Earth, they owned 800 acres of land used from the 1950s to 1995 as a field test site. And what exactly went on there? Well, to name a few of their fun activities, they blew up small rockets, they tested armor-piercing and incendiary rounds, they detonated explosives, they operated firing ranges, and they experimented with depleted uranium penetrators. I even came across rumors, credible enough to make me say, oh shoot, that the site contained landmines, and that they tested them by dropping cadavers onto them. Yes, bodies donated to science can be used for this kind of work.
That's not what you'd imagine was the fate of your body if you donated it to science. Dropped on a landmine. Okay, that explains the explosions that people have heard, of course. Yeah, with the mention of uranium, it's like I say, you know, that nuclear waste, that glowing. I mean, it could be that gas, the mist might have been a gaseous byproduct. Maybe. Again, I don't know. Yeah, which explains actually the caution, do not cross. But you'd think it would be, I mean, it just looked like signs on the road, but you could still go through it. Do you think it would be guarded? Under surveillance? I mean, it was, wasn't it? What does it look like today?
And truly, I could make a whole separate video about the weird things that might happen to your body when you donate it to science, but I'll spare you those details for now. And I don't know how true this rumor is, but some say those mines may still be buried on the property today. And of course, with decades of munitions testing comes decades of contamination. Runoff from the property has been linked to perchlorate, a rocket fuel oxidizer, toxic solvents, various metal pollutants, munitions residue, and of course depleted uranium, the kind of stuff you definitely don't want near your drinking water.
And in your soil for crops, if there's anything growing around here.
But yeah, it's definitely near the local drinking water. Just Google some of the local lawsuits and you'll get the picture. Because of this, over the past few decades, cleanup crews have removed some contaminated soil. But according to articles as recent as 2015, the site remains guarded, monitored, and very much off limits. Though, one bizarre detail, the Google Maps car I'm using for some of this footage apparently just drove right past the gates before its signal cut out.
That's what I was saying, you can't literally just drive through, right?
Whether that means the gate was just open that day and he drove inside by mistake, or whether the Google driver went kaboom, who can say, but RIP dude, just in case. In any case, this is one of those rare times I will say, if you visit, stop at the gate. The danger here isn't ghosts, cultists in robes, or disfigured mutants. The danger is that, no joke, there might still be unexploded ordnances out there. Or, you know, just general slow-killing water pollution. Which brings us back to the green mist, the explosions, and the mysterious military men chasing teens away. That was almost certainly real in some cases. Not supernatural, just the byproducts of decades of weapons testing happening right behind the fence. So if you lived in the area, did you ever visit? I'm dying to know who actually went down to Woodview Road back when Aerojet was still active.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Burbank's buried, man.
It wouldn't be a Southern California video without at least one police-related conspiracy, right? And before the Burbank PD sends me a strongly worded letter, I am simply reporting that since 2011, someone has plastered hundreds of flyers, posters, and handmade signs across the entire LA metro area.
What's that? Oh, okay.
On telephone poles,
too.
in parks, on street signs, and even at one point inside grocery stores, claiming they were the victim of an absolutely wild case of police misconduct in the early 2000s. According to these posters, the anonymous creator says that 5 Burbank police officers and, I quote, a rich man abducted him. Yes, abducted him, and then, in one of the strangest accusations ever put to paper, forced him to poop outside of a local steakhouse. After that, they allegedly took him to a place he calls Rolfe Castle, which visitors later describe as an abandoned sewage or waste pump house sitting between CA 134, a freeway, and the LA River, reachable by a dirt, pedestrian, and horse trail.
Okay.
From there, the story escalates. The man claims the officers and the supposed rich man tortured him, with some flyers even depicting him naked and having objects that look kind of like wires put in him. I'll leave it at that. And then he says the rich man would switch clothing with him, and after some time passed, they'd load him up with substances and bury him in a park, the aforementioned Rolfe Castle. According to the flyers, the only reason he survived was because someone he refers to as, I quote, the deform, or the rubber man, or the hidden man, depending on the letter you're reading, witnessed the whole thing. Then, through what he described as a miraculous circumstance, such as finding a hatch underground while buried in dirt, yes, I know, or God literally showing him a door, he escaped into a network of tunnels. These tunnels, he said, which were underground and under where he was buried, led him back to the surface, where he made it to Providence St. Joseph's Medical Center for treatment, which is really close to Rolfe Castle. Some flyers even include hand-drawn maps of these supposed passages beneath Rolfe Castle. Also, to be clear, I'm not sure how the rubber man or hidden man ended up being the reason he survived, but sometimes he claims that while still insisting that he found this underground door. Not sure how it works. Anyhow, speaking of drawings, they are something. Many depict scenes from this saga, including the so-called Rubber Man, but he also frequently includes E.T.
E.T.?
Yes, Steven Spielberg's E.T.
But if he was, loaded with substances, we don't know what. Maybe that could have caused crazy trips and hallucinating. So, maybe in this man's brain, E.T. was very much part of the story. It's how consistent is his story? Does he say the same thing each and every time? Or do new bits keep getting added on and details change? I think there's more to this. And I'd love to know if anyone watching, if you know any more details about this incident, let me know. Because I suppose it'd be quite easy to try and rule this off as the ramblings of someone who might be mentally unwell. But, the story sounds like it's based on a very, very random thing that happened to him. Well, if it happened to him. Maybe there's more context there that makes it sound a little bit kind of less crazy. And it could actually be worded in a way which is totally rational. I don't know. Let me know, guys.
To represent God, and other times he claims he found an E.T. toy while he was underground. And in other posters, and sorry, I'm laughing, he says he encountered a bananas in pajamas character, which he called food that looks wrong, and also occasionally draws peanuts characters. The imagery is downright chaotic, creative, and deeply confusing, to be brutally honest. Okay. Regardless, as bizarre as they are, the fact remains that these posters exist, and from what I can tell, they continue to appear around the LA area, even into modern day, and they read very much like the West Coast cousin to the Schuylkill notes you'll find on the East Coast. Part art project, part conspiracy, part fever dream. Further, there's a twist on these strange posters that makes the whole saga a little bit murkier. While I'm not going to identify who the internet thinks the original creator of this was out of respect, I will say that the interwebs seems to think the original creator of this poster passed away in November of 2011. So just about a month after these posters originally started showing up in October of 2011, and that he was struck by a car while crossing the 134 freeway near where this supposed event occurred in the first place. And as if these posters weren't the most psychedelic thing I've read in months in the first place, that raises a brand new mind screw of a question. If the guy who originally was suspected of making these posters passed away, who the heck has been drawing them and then posting these flyers ever since? Again, that's if this guy actually passed away. Now, on this front, there is plenty of speculation. That said, if the original poster has passed away, there's plenty of speculation as to who it is that's still posting these posters around. Some say it's the hidden man himself, with people claiming they've seen someone with a sort of deformed face, hence the name Rubber Man, putting the posters up, though these rumors are very much unsubstantiated.
Maybe it's
Others
in
have
his
reported
memory.
on a forum that they saw a police officer posting one of these, fueling some theories that this whole saga is true, and that a guilty cop is trying to expose the scandal anonymously. Though, in my opinion, given there's very little evidence put forward about who was making these in the first place, I think it's entirely possible, and dare I say the most probable, that the original creator of these posters is very much alive and well. Or maybe not well, but he seems to be alive. Regardless, while these posters are very much strange, one thing I think we should acknowledge is whoever is making these posters is actually a pretty decent artist, and this is perhaps a clue as to who was making these drawings. The drawings are legitimately well done, and given the mix of pencil, ink, charcoal, and paint, it's not hard to imagine this person may have had artistic training at some point. Despite, the chaotic storytelling. Because, if you watch these videos, I draw from time to time with a pen and Sharpie, and it's been hard enough to figure out how to do that well after my artist got busy. Further, there's yet another layer of this conspiracy too. The rich man in the drawings is very detailed, and some people online think the illustration resembles a certain former Burbank mayor and city council member. Now, I am absolutely not naming names because I have no interest in being obliterated by a lawsuit or kicked off of YouTube, and further, I wouldn't take these posters as any indication of someone's guilt or innocence. But I thought I'd share this detail in case you wanted to look up another relevant detail to the case. So, anyhow, I've got to be honest, these posters are insane, and simultaneously really interesting. And that leaves us with something that's maybe not much of a story, but is certainly a deeply unhinged piece of local folklore. If you're in the area and know more about this, I'd genuinely love to hear it, because this rabbit hole is already wild enough, but it feels like it could go a lot deeper.
It is absolutely wild, but I can't help thinking, of course, the images and the storytelling is going to seem very disjointed and very trippy, very psychedelic, because, like we've established, the guy who's drawn them has already stated that he was just given loads of drugs. So that's not a surprise. That's not a reflection on them being nuts or crazy. I think that's if you're going to remember or trying to recall these events under the influence of these psychedelic drugs, maybe psychedelic, I don't know, they are going to appear very, very much like nonsense and random, but at the same time, very visual and striking. Earthquake weather?
Across world folklore, people have always tried to read meaning into the weather. Ancient Rome, for example, treated lightning and thunder as Jupiter's personal
Zeus.
Yelp review on how society was behaving, a loud and usually disapproving one-star experience. A lightning strike on a building was a very bad omen, for instance, and clear skies before a battle, in contrast, usually signaled victory for soldiers heading into battle. The Norse, in contrast, had their own interpretations. A storm didn't necessarily mean doom, but it did mean Thor was nearby.
Yes.
Depending on how intense the storm was, that could be great news or a very bad time. And rainbows, those weren't just optics. They were believed to be the Bifrost, the literal bridge between Earth and Asgard, opening up. Even in medieval Europe, people believed weather could predict divine approval. For instance, on St. Swithin's Day, July 15th, whatever weather you got, whether it be rain or shine, was thought to continue for 40 days afterwards, a celestial thumbs up or thumbs down. Among all of these weather-based superstitions, though, sits one about earthquakes, the belief that certain types of weather can foreshadow seismic activity. In Southern California, this superstition is actually, funny enough, very common, and people call it earthquake weather. And while the idea exists all over the world, nowhere in the US have I seen it repeated as often as in Southern California, which makes sense since it's one of the most quake-prone regions in the country. Now, trying to track down the origin of the belief, the earliest mention I found, rather than coming from some surfer dude that hangs out in La Jolla, comes from Aristotle himself. He argued that still, hot, and sultry conditions were linked to earthquakes because, in his words, winds would become trapped underground.
Or it's like the four humours, but the four humours of the sky is the celestial four humours. You know, if you've got a bit of hot air there and you've got a cold front and you've got this, this, and this, it's going to end up with this weather. Okay, yeah, the Greeks, they did love the humours, didn't they?
Meaning less wind above ground meant more below. And also, in his words, underground winds were the cause of earthquakes. That's as early as I could confidently trace something akin to this superstition back, but I wouldn't be surprised if the old Stodle were influenced by someone predating him too.
Socrates.
Fast forward to the modern US,
Plato.
and the superstition remains very much alive. That said, pinning it to a single source is difficult, likely because the belief predates America entirely and simply found fertile ground in California due to its constant seismic activity.
But weren't earthquakes in Greece quite a regular phenomenon? No. I don't know. Yeah.
Still, you can see patterns in how people describe earthquake weather, and those patterns might hint at where the idea evolved. Now, reading posts from people talking about earthquake weather, I found two main camps describing it. The first group claimed it's clear, hot weather with calm winds during a dry spell. The second camp said earthquake weather was overcast, cool or cold, possibly misty, with pink skies and calm winds. So this is speculation on my part, but the first description lines up eerily well with the conditions surrounding the destructive 1933 Long Beach earthquake, a magnitude 6.4 event that caused widespread panic and destruction around LA. And frankly, it aligns with typical LA weather anyways. The second description resembles reports from the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which killed over 3,000 people and destroyed most of the city. It also aligns generally with San Francisco weather, being kind of cool and misty. It's not hard to imagine that memories of these disasters probably passed down over generations.
3,000 people back then. I mean, 3,000 people during an accident like that, a natural disaster like that is awful. But back then, you've got a smaller population, surely. Oh, how horrible.
And crystallized into two semi-regional versions of earthquake weather, one in Southern California and one in Northern California. Also, the calm winds element that both groups mention feels like a carryover from Aristotle's ancient explanation, or maybe that was also the condition during those old events. Now, modern discussions get even more speculative too. On California forums, plenty of people swear earthquake weather is real, not jokingly, but in full sincerity. Some argue that long-term changes in warm and cold seasons or shifting groundwater levels could actually influence seismic pressures.
I do believe the changing in water levels, that could be a very, very real indicator of something like an earthquake about to happen. Am I right there, guys?
Others have gone further, though, pointing at
it.
specific events. For instance, after Hurricane Hilary in 2023, some posters insisted that the pressure drop from the storm triggered the 5.1 magnitude Ojai earthquake that struck the very same afternoon Hilary arrived. So this is my attempt to trace the superstition's possible origins. Realistically, it probably grew out of many different events, slowly morphing and spreading through oral tradition, rather than emerging from any one moment. Which brings us to the big question, is earthquake weather real in any way? Surprisingly, I didn't expect this at all. The answer is more interesting than a flat no. The U.S. Geological Survey actually examined long-term earthquake data worldwide.
I think the answer is going to be, long answer is yes, short answer is no. Or the other way around. You can't. No. Elements of it can theoretically be an indicator, but generally speaking, certain things like, cloud formations and, a bit of a long period of dry, clear weather might not necessarily indicate it. But I think that, like the water levels, I could absolutely believe that would be an indicator.
Comparing it to seismic activity in hot, rainy, and cold weather, they found that earthquakes occur in all types of weather at roughly the same frequency. And this means day-to-day local weather variations don't impact your earthquake risk. But here's a twist. The USGS notes that their sample was way too small to be statistically airtight. And further, they did confirm that very large, low-pressure systems, such as hurricanes and typhoons, are actually known to trigger episodes of a fault slip, a type of slow earthquake, and may even contribute to setting off damaging quakes. So, in a strange, highly technical, and highly unfolkloric way, earthquake weather is kind of real. It's just
How would a hurricane trigger like a smaller earthquake, a more localized one maybe? How does that happen? Let me know, guys. Somebody out there know. A lot of you know, I reckon.
not what most people think, and it's only relevant during massive storm systems, not your
Right.
typical Southern California hot, dry, or still day. In short, I'm not telling you to panic, but if you live in Southern California and somehow find yourself in the middle of a hurricane, already a sort of once-in-a-generation event, you may be slightly more likely to feel the ground shake, too. Anyhow, other than this, I would consider any truth surrounding earthquake weather shaky at best. Okay, I'll see myself out.
No pun intended. Munchkinville? Oh, that sounds adorable! I'm a
Midgetville.
munchkin.
It's a name that has not
I'm 5
aged
foot
well
tall.
in today's world, and honestly, it probably shouldn't have. But it's still the label attached to one of these weird little American roadside legend categories. Think of it like the Elysian Park treasure rumors. It pops up in a bunch of places, the details change, but the vibe is always the same. You'll
Okay.
hear about supposed villages, built for little people, sometimes even fairies, sometimes actors, sometimes who knows what. Pennsylvania has one, Connecticut has one, and there's at least one in New Jersey that actually might have been made, built with scaled-down architecture for people much shorter than the rest of us.
They're a hobbit hole. They're not made for fairies. They're made for hobbits. I could live in one of those. They look very cozy, actually, don't they? And people were shorter, much shorter, a long time ago. In fact, what's quite funny is in older cities across the UK, you can see very old, like doorways, entrances, and they're significantly smaller. I mean, I can still fit through them, no problem. Um, but yes, I believe the science tells us that people were generally shorter, but I am talking about 500 years ago. Yeah, but I do think we've elongated, haven't we? We've become taller.
We'll get there someday, and I'm excited for it. But for now, the West Coast is absolutely not immune to these miniature village legends, and Southern California alone has a couple of them. So let's start with the one down in the San Diego area.
Okay.
The legend says that back in the 1930s, a group of little people who worked the Hollywood circuit, munchkins from The Wizard of Oz and other films needing their small but important services, made some serious Depression-era cash. Apparently, they made more money than a 2025 YouTuber too, because after filming, the story claims they headed down to Mount Soledad, near San Diego, and built themselves a cluster of miniature houses where they could live in peace just a mile or so from La Jolla Beach.
And all of the shops and everything around are accessible and small friendly. And I 100% see that being a total thing. I like the idea of it, actually.
The
I'll
legend
come and
then
live
gets vague, as legends do, and insists that these little houses were secluded, which has misled generations of confused explorers. Luckily, online forums, though, exist to politely correct our wrong turns. In reality, if you're driving through La Jolla, all you have to do is turn left off of Torrey Pines Road onto Hillside Drive. That's it. There's no secret colony in the brush, just a neighborhood with what used to be 4 of these quirky little cottages. Today, though, along a street full of very normal houses, only one of these little person's homes survives, at 7477 Hillside Drive. And when you look at it, you instantly get why it became a legend. There are tiny little windows, a low roof, a small front door, odd hand-scribbled numbers marking the address next to the archway of its front door, which in some social media is described as the writing of a crazy midget, and because irony is alive and well, there's of course a massive Ford Raptor parked in the driveway on Google Maps that looks like it could crush the place. Again,
I think these look absolutely charming. They do. I thought the narrator was going to say the house number that's inscribed, not inscribed. It's alongside the door there. The font that's used, the script. It's a font, isn't it? Is it me, or does it closely resemble the dwarven runes, the dwarven writing from Lord of the Rings? On the Cave of Moria was written there. I thought he was going to say that. But yeah, I think they look charming.
You can't make this stuff up.
Airbnb?
The legend
I'll stay
insists
there.
that the little people who once lived here would defend their homes by hurling rocks at curious gawkers. Though these days, based on the ADT security sign out front, I think they've probably upgraded to a more modern anti-trespassing technology. Also, if you're the actual homeowner watching this, hi, I hope you're well, and I'm deeply jealous of your La Jolla real estate, but in a happy for you kind of way. But given there's an F-150 out front, I'm guessing the Munchkinville part of the story is a relic from a very different era, and you're probably a more average-sized person. Which, if you aren't, no hate at all, and I still wish you the best. But don't worry, San Diego isn't the only alleged Munchkinville in Southern California. The other one is up in Claremont, California, and it's much harder to confirm, but honestly, it's more of a typical urban legend overall. In this one, people online recount how back in the day, they'd drive up to a certain spot at night, and they'd swear that down in a small ravine, they saw what looked like miniature houses. Now, maybe it was an optical illusion, or maybe it wasn't, but the rumor places these structures near the old Padua Theater, and the story goes that at one point there were about 50 mailboxes on the right-hand side of the road. Your sign you were in the right place. Next to these mailboxes, supposedly there were once signs that read, "The Lord helps those who help themselves, but Lord help anybody caught helping themselves around here." Seems like a warm, friendly welcome. People also say that residents would throw rocks at intruders, or that I quote, crazy woman, their words, not mine, would rush out screaming whenever someone triggered the motion-activated lights that apparently dotted the private road and set off alarms inside of their home. Now, just to be extremely clear, this is and always was private property, so don't go wandering down anyone's road. But if you're curious and want to poke around Google Maps, which is perfectly legal, the directions circulating online say, exit the 210 at Baseline and go east. Take a right on Padua or Monte Vista towards the mountains. Take this road up the hill, park at the Padua Theater, then there's a dirt road next to the theater marked dead-end private property, then go until a fork and take the paved path, follow it as it curves right and descends into a ravine, then that ravine is where the town supposedly was. They say there were spotlights everywhere and that visitors were trespassing. Now, to be clear, I looked and I personally couldn't find the place, and while I found the general area, there are forum posts claiming the entire alleged Munchkinville here in this case may have burned down during 2008 wildfires, which seems possible. But I want to know what you know here. Have you heard of this Munchkinville or the San Diego one, and did you ever go looking for either of these places when you were younger? Let me know down below what you found.
Paul, what do you reckon? Have you seen these? Anyone? The missing Scientologist figurehead. Ooh, who's this?
Here, we're going to talk about a polarizing figure, one Shelley Miscavige, the wife of the most powerful person in the Church of Scientology, David Miscavige. On the outside, Shelley Miscavige, despite being a member of a very controversial organization, sort of had it all. She was born into Scientology, admittedly groomed from childhood, rose through its elite ranks, and married David Miscavige. Throughout this time, she was quiet but fiercely dedicated, supportive but not just a dutiful wife. She was known to manage the church's relationships, helped steer its inner workings, and stood beside her husband like the queen of the religion. But then, in 2006, something shifted. After a seemingly routine trip, she returned changed, less confident, more fearful. She made bold moves behind the scenes one day, and the next, she was gone. That August, she appeared briefly at her father's funeral, flanked by handlers of sorts, and then she vanished, some might say for good. Today, nearly 2 decades later, Shelley Miscavige hasn't been seen in public since.
Maybe mental health. Maybe she had a bit of a mental health crisis. That would explain almost like a bit of a change of personality somewhat when she came back, and then withdrawing herself. I mean, I'm just trying to explain it, guys. That doesn't sound totally crazy. And then not wanting to be in the spotlight anymore, and being quite introverted. No?
Despite this, though, the Church of Scientology insists that she's safe and alive, devoted to her calling. But former insiders, investigators, and critics wonder, where is she really? Now, before we get into this, let's quickly talk a bit more about Shelley. To begin, Shelley Miscavige was born Michelle Diana Barnett on January 18th of 1961 in Dallas, Texas, to a family that was already a member of the Church of Scientology.
Right.
And at the age of 12, she'd even serve aboard seminal leader L. Ron Hubbard's ship as a member of the Sea Organization, a sort of sub-organization within Scientology that requires its members to contractually commit to 1 billion years of service. Yeah, you heard that right, 1 billion years. I'd say you can't make this stuff up, but L. Ron Hubbard sure did. Now, at the age of 21, after rising through the ranks, she'd go on to marry David before he had a high position within the church, and according to insiders who have since defected, she was highly involved in his work and in the church, sort of acting as the first lady of the Church of Scientology. That said, as I stated in the intro, things would change. Shelley would return home from a trip aboard the Free Winds, a cruise ship affiliated with the Church of Scientology, before her husband, and while he was away, she, on her own, actually made appointments to the organization's board. According to those who were around her at the time, they say that Shelley seemed different at this point, a bit cowed or intimidated or afraid, and she apparently even asked a colleague, Scientology's then chief spokesman, if her husband was still wearing his wedding ring. And following this, with the exception of attending her father's funeral in August of 2007, she was literally never seen again. Now, if someone hadn't been seen in, days even, and nobody could confirm their whereabouts, I've watched enough forensic files to know that it's not just acceptable, but is borderline standard to launch a missing persons investigation and confirm this individual's whereabouts. You'd at least expect the police might, want to make contact with the potential victim. But no, despite a missing persons report being filed with the LAPD regarding Shelley, the first report made by an anonymous individual was described by the LAPD as unfounded, and the investigation was closed within hours.
Does that just not mean that maybe somebody, like, not someone close, but, they reported, they made a missing person report, and then the police confirmed that there was no grounds for it because they've already confirmed from people closer to her that she's perfectly well, and maybe just doesn't want to appear in public as much as she did like months prior. To me, that kind of screams that something's happened, like in the way of like a mental crisis, a mental health crisis, a breakdown, an episode. Did she have a history of mental health? That's what it screams to me.
Later, the LAPD would say they located and spoke to Shelley, but some people consider this claim dubious. And as recently as 2018, Leah Remini has made it a point to publicly push for an investigation into not just the disappearance of Shelley, but also into conflicts of interest between the Hollywood division of the LAPD and the Church of Scientology. That said, while we don't know anything for certain, some former Church of Scientology members have come forward and claimed they believe they know where Shelley is being held, and there's even a cool video that's come forward of this location. Now, to start, the story that many, even defectors from the church, claim is that Shelley may very well still be a committed member of the Church of Scientology, but that it seems for some reason David Miscavige wanted her out of his sight permanently, and they think that he likely sent her where he sent others before that he wanted away from him for good, to a spot known as the Twin Peaks Compound, a part of the Church of Scientology's Church of Spiritual Technology in San Bernardino, California, an organization connected to the church that doesn't just own the copyrights to all of L. Ron Hubbard's writings, but also preserves them in remote, disaster-proof underground vaults, making it one of the most secretive branches of the church, and a place that will literally likely preserve the works of L. Ron Hubbard forever, for what it's worth. It's here in one of the cottages in this secret compound that many claim Shelley works to this day, and that she's probably been here, perhaps inside of a cottage, for the better part of 2 decades, which...
Maybe they're divorced or estranged or separated. How does the Church of Scientology feel about divorce? I don't know, sorry, I might sound very ignorant asking. I don't know what their stance is on divorce, but maybe marital problems?
to me is absolutely freaking horrifying. This has actually been covered by fellow YouTuber and Scientology escapee Aaron Smith-Levin, who through his many discussions with insiders claims that Shelley is probably living in this cottage right here, which has been appropriately labeled Shelley's Cottage on Google Maps since. These clips, by the way, were taken via what I think is probably a legal, but what was a very undesirable drone, which flew over this compound a few years back in 2018. Anyhow, I love a good obscure missing person story, and I thought it might be worth sharing one of the strangest missing, but maybe not missing persons cases I've ever had the pleasure of reading. Anyhow, Shelley certainly isn't watching this video, but I hope she's okay out there, and I hope one day she breaks free of whatever's holding her down.
Okay. Oh, it's the end of the video.
Folks, I hope you enjoyed this little dive into Southern California's weirdest tales, and I'm not done with y'all yet. Down the line, I plan to cover your cryptids too, and soon, probably some of Hollywood's strangest folklore. Anyhow, if you want to see more like this, it's easy. Just like the video, comment, and subscribe. It'll never cost you a dime, and it's a quick way to say, hey YouTube, this guy's alright. It helps me out a ton, and it's all you need to do. Further, without further ado, whether you just saw a strange silent craft flying through the sky and then land at Fashion Island, or if you just heard a weird explosion coming from Disneyland, followed by a bit of green mist, don't you ever forget, it's always story time.
Oh, I do love a good folklore story. Right, okay. Missing people's cases they always pique everyone's interest, and everyone always has a wild conspiracy theory or an opinion. To me, I mean, maybe it's a very naive perspective because I don't know an awful lot about Scientology, if I'm honest. What makes people think that she's held there, against her will? Is that like a common thing? Could it be just as likely that there were marital problems, Shelley's not happy, she's not coping with life too well, maybe there's a mental health crisis going on there, and a number of different things, but maybe her and her partner want to divorce, and maybe it's frowned upon, so they have to estrange, stay working for the same Scientology church, but from a distance. Maybe she does not want a public facing role in the church, and I don't know how naive that actually sounds. I mean, if I knew more about it, it might sound crazy, but I don't know. So let me know in the comments what your opinions are, guys, or why is that totally wrong, or do you agree? I don't know. It's very, very interesting. I do love all of these folklore stories, and I don't know, the more localized they are, the more kind of believable they are. Do you know what I mean? But, I think my favourite are the Munchkin stories. That should be set up as an Airbnb. In all seriousness, I think I'd fit in. Nothing could be too tall from the shelves. Everything's accessible. It sounds great, in my opinion. So we didn't have any Mothmen or any Bigfoot, but maybe, we've all heard those stories, haven't we, a few times. So I've not heard a single one of these stories. So very, very interesting. Thank you, Paul, for requesting this video, the weird and wonderful stories of Southern California. I love them. Why is it known as the weirdest state? I've got to know. I ask so many questions. Thank you for taking the time to answer all of them, guys. Why is that Southern California known as being so weird? Well, other states are known as being weird. Anyway, my lovelies, I hope you enjoyed watching that lengthy video. I don't know what time we're actually on now, but hey-ho, if you're still here, thank you. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.